Welcome to the Big Picture Film Club. My name's Presh Williams. My guest today is Adam Sipione, one half of the filmmaking duo behind the video game documentary A Gamer's Journey, The Definitive History of Shenmue. Adam, welcome to the Big Picture Film Club. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to talk about Shenmue and documentary films, as always.
I'm certain that anyone sort of clicking, well, the majority of people clicking on this link immediately would kind of know what Shenmue is, but particularly for those who don't know or who may have heard about this game, Shenmue, are you able to give us like a quick rundown about what Shenmue is?
Yeah, I'll do my best. It's funny, like a decade ago, the number of people who would know what Shenmue is would be a lot less. So it's kind of cool to see, like in the 10 years, just it's hasn't been like absorbed in part of the zeitgeist, but it's certainly crept its way into pop culture for sure. But yeah, okay. So Shenmue is a video game that came out for the Sega Dreamcast in 1999, and at the time it was rumored to be one of the most expensive, probably the most expensive video game ever made at the time. And it was created by a man named Yu Suzuki, who his claim to fame was through arcade games in the Sega Japanese arcade scene. He pioneered games like Afterburner and Outrun, and a really popular one, Virtua Fighter, which was kind of like the inspiration behind Shenmue. And to put it as simply as I can, Shenmue is basically Yu Suzuki's first time dipping his foot into something that was more narratively driven, more long form RPG, and he wanted to really change the foundation and redefine what a Japanese RPG was. So it's a little bit action game, a little bit RPG, a little bit adventure, a little bit of a walking simulator, which was a term that was coined way later, but Shenmue was one of those games. And yeah, it's there's a lot to say. There was two parts, and then there was a big cliffhanger, and then there was nothing for about 15 years. And I probably didn't do the explanation very much justice, but yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. It
Yeah.
was a big game at the time, but unfortunately, the fan base wasn't. The fan base was there, just it wasn't the financial success that they wanted it to be.
And on that note about like the fan base, like so, like yeah, I got Shenmue. I was one of the few people who I knew who had a Dreamcast. I was very excited seeing like the previews of Shenmue's and in the magazines. Like I bought Games Master magazine here in the UK, and for me, it was like an incredible experience. Like I got it for as a Christmas present, so it would have been the I guess '99 Christmas. And yeah, it was actually like an unreal experience as a game. Like you'd never seen something so immersive before, and it holds up in many respects today. But like in terms of the fan base, it's it's very interesting because I have not seen anything like it. It's not like there are well-known characters like Mario and Sonic who people kind of know, right? You know of Mario and Sonic, but the Shenmue as a series has almost this cult-like fan base. Um, and I guess why is that? Like 20, more than 20 years on, where there's still that cohort of people who are like you know very much in support of the series, very much diehard fans, and very much want to see the story continue.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, why is that the case? I don't know. It's interesting. Like that was kind of the when I first started making this film. That was almost like the why. That's what I was trying to answer. What is it about this game that draw people to it over all of the other fantastic video games out there? And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out that answer, and I feel like I never really found the concrete why. It's a mix of I think it's just the time and place that the game came out. Like I said, the internet was already a thing, but still in its early days.
Mm.
And you had a group of people kind of born, within a certain few years of each other, that when they got to that period in 1999, 2000, that turn of the century, we were already consuming really influential media that was kind of like shaping our identity. And I'll just use myself as an example, but big into anime. Like, I loved Dragon Ball Z. I loved Japanese films. Pokemon was a huge part of my childhood. And Shenmue was kind of like, because it was such a detailed, story-driven walking simulator, if you want to use that term. When I played it, and I'm sure why other people played it, it resonated with them just so clearly and so perfectly, because they're taking you into this world that they've always dreamt about visiting, right? But because the internet was new, they didn't have access to as much information as we did now. We were at an age where we didn't have, disposable income or time to really hop on a plane and go to Japan, because we're all 12, 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
And yeah, Shenmue was just like this window, this portal into this life that we were just infatuated with for whatever reason.
And what was your like personal like first experiences of the game? How did you find it?
Yeah, my intro into the Shenmue games was different than most. So you're from the UK. You mentioned that you got it for a Christmas present. And in talking to a lot of people and just being a part of the Shenmue community and making the film, it seems like the Dreamcast had a really strong foothold in the UK. In parts of the United States, yes, but where I lived, where I grew up in Canada, in my little pocket of Ontario, no one had a Dreamcast. There was like 2 kids in my town that had one, and they were like the outcast because they didn't play, they didn't have the Nintendo 64. They weren't playing Grand Theft Auto 3. So the way I discovered it was through Shenmue 2 for the Xbox.
Oh,
Oddly
okay.
enough. Yeah, which is very strange. I had an older brother who rented a bunch of games from our local Blockbuster, and it was like, Halo and all the big, like the huge titles, and one of them was Shenmue 2. And like, I saw the box. You probably remember that cover art for the Xbox release of
Yeah,
Shenmue
yeah,
2.
yeah.
To this day, it's probably one of my favorite box arts of all time, just because it's like, it's just so, I don't know, like the flavor of it and everything. I look at it and I'm like, this looks like every 80s martial arts film I grew up watching and loving. Like,
Yeah.
this is right up my alley. So I was like, I have to play this game. And it came with that little digest movie that you watch. It's like an hour and
Yeah,
a half,
yeah.
2 hours of cutscenes.
Yeah.
And I watched that because I'm like a guy who I need to know what's going on. I'm not just going to play the game. I want to know what the story's about. And I thought it was the coolest thing that like the devs would take the time to piece that together. And I was like, this is awesome. So I dove right into Shenmue 2, blasted through that game. As soon as I was done, I was like, I need to find one of those weird Dreamcast kids, and I need to get their Dreamcast, and I need to find a copy of Shenmue. And that's how it started. Ever since then, it's been like one of my favorite games of all time.
And then, so I guess, how do you go from that to then deciding, many years later, I want to make a documentary about whatever this thing is, this experience, this community, this game. What's that sort of genesis point for you?
Yeah, it was a long time after. So I'm gonna say about 14, 15 years old is when I first kind of dabbled with Shenmue. And after that, it was like every day on the internet, Googling, Shenmue 3 rumors, because I needed to know when it was coming
Yeah.
out, what was happening. And that stuck with me from all the way through high school, at least till when I graduated in that like victory lap. I was like just Shenmue constantly. And then at one point I had to kind of like tuck it away in the back of my head, go to school, start building my life and my career and just growing up essentially. So I went to film school just because I was really big. I was actually the reason I went was because I just too stupid to excel in any other form of studies. So I was like, film school, this is for me. So I went there, and after graduated, I just kind of like, I don't know, I think through social media, started finding some Shenmue communities and kind of got back into the scene that way, and seeing a lot of familiar names and faces that were a big part of it back then. And seeing them still into it was kind of what motivated me to be like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I'm going to dive back into the Shenmue world and see what's going on. And that's when I started seeing how intense and passionate some people were with like creating like graphics and images and photoshops or whatever, just trying to keep the Shenmue flame alive and trying to campaign for Shenmue 3 and just keeping it in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is awesome. Like, if I, like, what am I good at, or what can I do, or what do I have the experience to try to throw my hat in the ring, and what would my contribution look like? And I'm fresh out of film school. I have no real work experience. Just I'm at this point, I'm doing corporate stuff, weddings, the stuff that a lot of
Yeah.
early cinematographers, whatever, do to kind of get their foot in the door. And I was like, okay, if I could just make like a 30-minute thing where I'm talking to fans, and maybe I could go fly out and see a couple of the voice actors and put together this little love letter to Shenmue, that would be my contribution to the series, right? And my
Mm.
little Hail Mary of like, hey, people still love this game. Here's a 30-minute thing on YouTube. Yeah, do what you want with it. And it was around that time that when I moved to the town I live in now, I met up with the other half of the filmmaking duo, but it's actually three more people. Definitive Films is the company that they own, and they
Right.
produce like really, really well produced documentary films about pop culture. So they did one on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they were working on one on Conan the Barbarian and He-Man. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, I'm going to pitch the Shenmue project to these guys. And I
Right.
did, and they thought it was great because it's such a niche little thing, and I was putting a lot of work and research into it. And yeah, that's kind of, once those stars kind of aligned, that was when we really went like, we dove in head first and really tried to make a go of it.
And how was I guess the experience of like filming and sort of talking to a lot of the creative minds behind Shenmue? And did it feel, I mean, how did it feel to sort of like pull back the curtain for, because you have this, you have a perception of the world that is Shenmue. And then when you kind of meet the creatives, it's very interesting to hear how things came together. But did that also sort of ruin a bit of the mystique for you, or like how is that sort of that interplay for you?
You're alluding to the phrase like "don't meet your heroes" or whatever, that kind of thing. Luckily, in that, it wasn't my experience in that case. I had a very positive experience with it. But I know what you mean. Like, as a fan, does getting a peek behind the curtain kind of like ruin the mystique or change your perspective? I gotcha.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, at first, it did a little bit, but I got a lot of that out of my system. And this is going to sound like really embarrassing, but like when I was just meeting the voice actors, first of all, I was just super nervous and excited to meet these guys, and because like they're such a huge part of my life, and when I met them, I'm like, oh, they're just normal people. I could calm down. I don't know why I'm getting myself so worked up. And the nice thing is the myself and Randall Lobb, who is the other director, producer, writer of the film, he is not a Shenmue fan at all. He is a filmmaker first, and he understands pop culture. And I'm, an up and coming wannabe filmmaker, but huge Shenmue fan. So I think us being able to go into these interviews, and if it was just me, I would have butchered it because I would be gushing too much, and go back to that
Yeah.
Chris Farley skit on SNL. Just remember when Ryo Hazuki fought Chai at the end of Shenmue 1? Like, wasn't that awesome? I feel like I would just naturally do that because I was in that fanboy mode. So having Randall there to kind of reel me back in, and we played off each other a lot, was really good. And over time, I kind of developed that voice when you're interviewing somebody. That to the point where we went to Japan, I was doing a lot of the interviews solo because we had to split up our efforts to cover a lot of ground. And that was kind of good because I got the coaching, or I had really cut my teeth
Mm.
on it before. So when we got to Japan, I was a little bit more of a seasoned interviewer, filmmaker. It was nice. But yeah, there were certain times when seeing some of that behind the scenes stuff, I couldn't help but, get all giddy and excited. Especially seeing the
Yeah.
Shenmue 3 development in the early stages was really, really cool.
And I guess we're an interesting point in the saga where we have Shenmue 3, and obviously there's still very much a whole story to tell past Shenmue 3. But we also have like Shenmue the anime, and like, oh, did you get a chance to watch the anime? And like, what were your thoughts on the anime compared to the video game?
I did. I saw the anime. I was purposely holding out until all the episodes were released, and at that time I was like really just like, you know, head down trying to get this thing finished and get the copies made and whatever. So I was tuning all other Shenmue news out, but
Right.
once I had my head above water, I watched the anime in full, and I thought it was really amazing. I loved it, and kind of sad to hear that it wouldn't continue and get that second season.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I thought they were doing so many really cool things with the Shenmue IP when that anime was announced. I'm like, this is really awesome. Like, I love the direction this is
Yeah.
going.
And so I guess as a you're not quite an insider, but you at least have like a peek behind the curtains. And so, do you think we will see a Shenmue 4?
Oh, I mean, I can't give a concrete answer. My peek behind the curtain ended when Shenmue 3 was being, that was when I was peeking behind the curtain. What happens after that is anyone's guess. All I could say is that, like, I know for a fact that it's something that Yu Suzuki will carry around with him forever, and I know it's something that he really wants to do and that fans want to happen. So it's hard to be as pessimistic as I used to be in regards to Shenmue 3 with that 15-year gap. Now seeing that happen, seeing the
Yeah.
Shenmue 3 Kickstarter happen and having the game in my hands and actually playing it, I'm a lot more optimistic that we will see a Shenmue 4, even if it is, a long wait. I think there's a chance because after the Shenmue 3 thing happened, I'm like, oh, anything is possible.
And lastly, like, where can people find your documentary, and where can people discover about more about Shenmue, and yeah, really sort of
Yeah,
check out
so
your
I mean, I
documentary?
would love it if people checked out the documentary. So it's now not streaming, it's available for digital download and renting online on a bunch of different streaming services like Amazon, YouTube, Google Play, Microsoft, and Apple iTunes. Um, it is region specific, so I know it's Canada, US, and the UK. You can get it on all those places. Other European countries, I'm not sure. I know for a fact that Vimeo on Demand is worldwide, and Nacelle Company is the distribution company that we're working with. So on their website, Nacelle, they have the documentary page up there on one of their pages, and at the bottom they have links where you could watch it. So yeah, and I'm plugging it away all the time on Twitter and the Facebook page, and
Cool.
a lot of the Shenmue fan pages are helping spread the word. So yeah, hopefully people will be able to find it and see it, and leave an honest review. That's another thing that would be huge. I'm not looking for people to like review bomb it with like 10 out of 10s, but like as a filmmaker, I'm like, I want to know how I did at my first feature length
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
documentary. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, we'll definitely include links to the to purchase the film within this interview. And Adam, yeah, once again, like, congratulations on a great piece of work. From a personal standpoint, as someone who, first saw it, what age was I when? Yeah, around 11, like 11, 12. Having first experienced Shenmue and kind of having that long wait between Shenmue 2 and 3. And yeah, it's really, it's a real privilege to sort of kind of really see behind the creative process, Yu Suzuki and the whole team. And so, yeah, thank you for what you've done on the documentary. It's like really incredible work. And I think, more people should sort of like discover how important Shenmue is in gaming history. It's really a pivotal part of gaming history.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for saying that. And yeah, like I think it's something that Shenmue fans will enjoy. I think obviously like it's about a franchise that they love, so they're gonna get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But that was the primary audience. But I think people who are interested in gaming on like maybe even a casual or a little bit more serious level, who don't know what Shenmue is, would get a lot of value out of it just because, we do go back and look through the history of the Sega consoles, leading up to the Dreamcast and a lot about the Japanese arcade industry. And so it's not something that is exclusively for Shenmue fans. Obviously, they're going to be able to pick out a lot more of the nuances in it. But I think if you know nothing about Shenmue and are a fan of video games, it might be worth a watch just to kind of get that, because I don't think there's really a detailed Shenmue Sega story out there in documentary format. I think we were just right place at the right time to tell the story and talk to the people that we did. So, yeah.
Well, Adam, once again, thank you very much for your time, and thanks for joining us at the Big Picture Film Club.
It was fun. Thank you so much.